One statement is certainly true when it comes to talking not only about Brexit, the referendum, but Brexiteers themselves. Back in 2016, the Brexiteers were making promises left, right, and centre. So much so, even back then, I was saying they are making all these promises that they cannot keep, that even they know they cannot keep. But they are making these promises because at the end of the day, they do not care because they have a greater plan that essentially involved all that free market fundamentalism that Liz Truss desperately sort of wanted to indulge in, which pretty much all the Brexiteers really wanted to indulge in, to turn the UK into this Singapore on the Thames style economy, which they always, really wanted when you start to sort of not, mine down into sort of what they wanted. Very often that was what they would eventually say. Oh, well, we actually really want this, Singapore and the STEM style economy, low regulation, low tax. That was the only time they did it. But they were very, very careful not to sort of broadcast that. What they instead focused on was these big, grandiose promises. And one of them, of course, came from Jacob Rees-Mogg, who infamously said, not only are energy prices going to be lower after Brexit, but also food prices as well, that food prices would be lower because of Brexit, because we'd be able to do all these things that the government could do to lower food prices. Like, doesn't seem to be happening. And especially with the government's new plan for these new border post checks, which are set to come in this year, there are a lot of people in the food industry that are very, very spooked by this. Very spooked indeed. Not only that, but as we'll find out just in a moment, food prices aren't set to go down because of this. They are set to increase because all these costs, the food companies are going to pass them on to the consumer. They cannot absorb these costs because they're already having to absorb a lot more costs for food. And it's not just sort of the Ukrainian war. It's not just the post-pandemic effects. It is the Brexit that is affecting this. It is the Brexit costs. So let's go have a look into this because, oh boy. So before we do, though, please do remember to click on the like and share button. And, of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and one updation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And, of course, there is the YouTube Pony Club you can join as well, and the YouTube thank you button as well. And, of course, if you are new to the channel, do remember to click on that subscribe button to get more videos about the bizarre world of UK politics. And, of course, tomorrow, remember, we will be having our good morning walk as always. So we will see you bright and early, as always, out there with the ponies. Weather permitting, of course, as always. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to get some good weather. So let's crack on into this, because this comes from The Grocer. This is an industry magazine about the food industry. So, this is something that is going to be, we're quite concerned about this. So, like I say, their title of this is Food Companies to Foot the Bill for Brexit Border Posts Under New Plans. So, the UK's new Brexit border plan, published this week, could see food companies paying many multi-millions of pounds to help the government recover the costs for its new Brexit border posts. Again, pre-Brexit, we did not need this at all. We just did not need them. But now we're having to set up all this infrastructure, all this stuff, which is going to add time and all kinds of stuff, which is going to make trading and importing and exporting even harder. So after repeatedly delaying the border checks for the EU goods entering the UK, the government today published its draft proposal for the new, quote, simplified. Again, they are far from simplified. If you've ever seen what they are actually proposing, bear in mind, it used to be just a sheet. Like that was it. It was just one page. It's not that anymore. And it is very, very complicated. So it launched its new draft proposal for the simplified process due to launch later this year. The new border target operating model builds on the previous proposals agreed as part of the Brexit trade deal. So, under the plans, any producers, any products such as meat or dairy that are eligible for physical inspections will be forced to pay between £20 to £43 per consignment to help the government recover operating costs which are necessary to undertake physical inspections at the BCPs or the border control posts. So already that is now an extra cost these companies now have to pay. And that is per consignment. So that will add up. That will add up to quite a lot. And if you're exporting multiple times on a weekly basis, that's a whole lot of money you've suddenly got to start shelling out for this. Where previously, that was just not the case. So the charge would apply to all eligible consignments, whether or not they are selected for a border control check inspection, the document says. So it doesn't matter, you have to pay that. Even if you do not have to go through that process, it looks like everyone will be paying for this. And this isn't just going to affect food, it's going to affect thousands of different products. And bear in mind, this works both ways, not just exporting, but eventually, I suspect, importing as well. So just as we've seen UK companies just said, we're just going to give up because it's just become too expensive. The cost has just become too prohibitive. We've seen European manufacturers saying, you know what, all that extra paperwork, all that extra cost, it's just not worth it. We've got plenty more customers in the EU. We saw that, and that's what led to the shortages we saw in vegetables and tomatoes. You know, they've got other customers. They don't have to bother with all that extra paperwork, all that extra cost. Again, who needs who more? I remember the Brexiteers explicitly saying that the EU needed us far more than we needed them. So for now, this is just an estimate. So that at the moment, that £20 to £43 is an estimate. The final rates will be determined following a consultation. So that is just an estimate. I think that's going to become more expensive. I highly think so. These plans have alarmed importers who now face new, huge costs to help fund government spending. It's a massive additional cost if you aggregate, said Shane Brennan, the CEO of the Cold Chain Federation. We are talking about millions to pay the government to fund its infrastructure and people sitting at those booths. The new border model has also made changes to processes for many products. The low-risk animal and plant products like oats and potatoes will no longer need export health certificates or phytosanitary certificates as initially planned. However, medium-risk animal and plant products like meat will still need the certificates from November and will go through physical checks from the 31st of January. This means that those sectors will probably be severely disrupted due to the more rigorous checks at the border, said Brennan. To try and ease this process, the government is trying to plan a trusted traders scheme, which will allow regular importers to try and avoid these full border checks every time. Again, I don't know how well this scheme is going to go. We'll see what happens. But I'm sure, given the fact the government has managed to screw up everything else when it's tried to do something very similar, I'm probably expecting something very similar to happen, to be honest. We would welcome views on how our new proposed approach could be made simpler as possible for businesses to use. You know what would be hilarious? If every single business started saying, just rejoin the EU, just rejoin the Single Market Customs Union. That would be hilarious. It has said in recent weeks that customs agents have complained that the existing border software is already causing issues at the border. Again, something we've talked about before about how this software is just not fit for purpose. It is old. It cannot even talk to the EU's new system that they've got in place. So one's customs operator was even operating under the new model, said that traders would still face queues because of the appalling customs declaration service. The operators fears that the software introduced as part of the wider goods vehicle movement service to enable trucks to cross the border smoothly would cause further disruption once the full checks on the EU goods came into effect next year. The FDF's head of international trade, Dominic Goody, said that we hope to plan to introduce certification and checks on EU imports and will produce the necessary stimulus to both the UK and the European to cooperate on improving the implementation of the Brexit trade agreement and to try and ensure the deal works as intended for SMEs. Well, it certainly isn't at all. That's certainly for sure. And like I say, what incentive does the EU have to try and get, this trade to work properly? Because it has been this Brexit government under Boris Johnson that basically said, yeah, we're not really interested in wanting to talk to you. So they did the most bare bones trade deal possible. And whether Rishi Sunak is going to himself do some new deals with the EU, which would almost certainly mean alignment, when he's already come out and said he's ruled that out, suggests that that trade is only going to get worse. And ultimately, that is going to have massive knock-on effects for the economy. So, a cabinet office spokesperson said the government is trying to deliver on our ambition to have the world's most effective border. The world's most effective border. We already had probably one of the world's most effective borders. Brexit just made it incredibly much worse. So our new target operating model will try and reduce the need for checks on many types of goods. We're trying to work with stakeholders to try and take a pragmatic approach to phasing in these new controls to give business the opportunity to prepare. You've said that every single time, and you've moved them 3 times already. Now, will they dare pull the trigger this time? I think, to be honest, there's a very good 50-50 chance they just don't roll over again. I really think they do. I think, bear in mind, last time we were literally like 3 or 4 weeks out of these rules coming into place, and then Jacob Rees-Mogg comes along and said, "No, not doing them now. I'm moving them to a year again." Will that happen again? I generally don't know, but I think there's a good opportunity. I think if the government think that this is going to cause massive problems and certainly massive supply chain issues, which almost certainly it will, then I could see them trying to move this again until next year. I really, really do. Because I don't think they want to be responsible for what is going to happen. And they know what's going to happen because we've been talking about it constantly all this time. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I am very, very skeptical that these border checks will come into force again because they've said this 3 times. And every single time they've said it, the exact same thing. Oh, yeah, we're really going to do it this time. And they've just scooched it on another year. Will they pull the trigger this time? Yes, there is a good chance that they might. But equally, I am highly skeptical considering they've dodged pulling that trigger 3 times already. So we'll see what happens. But when it does happen, oh boy, is there going to be some awful trouble at the borders. Now, for me, it'll be great because that means we've got a ton of content to talk about. But for supply chains, cost of food, a whole range of businesses and other stuff, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please do remember to click on that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.